Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Judy Gilmore. I'm the director at Opelka Gallery at Russell Sage College. And tonight, I am very excited to present the second in our lecture series this semester with Russell Sage's own Melinda McDaniel. Before we introduce Melinda, I just want to plug a few things that are going on at opened our exhibition Unraveling, featuring work by Yura Adams, Joan Grubin, Ruby Palmer, and Christina Tenaglia. As part of that exhibition, two of those artists will be joining us for the lecture series later in this semester. Yura Adams will be doing a lecture just like this virtually on November 12th, and Christina Tenaglia will be giving an artist lecture on December 3rd. So we hope you can join us for those. And please do come by to see the show. We are open to in-person visits. We are open Tuesdays through Saturdays, 12 to 5 p.m. and Thursdays, 12 to 8 p.m. And we are welcoming visitors safely. All visitors are required to wear masks, to also stay social distance, and they must fill out a short health questionnaire, and have their temperature taken upon entering. We are also keeping our numbers low, so you will mostly have the gallery to yourself, if only sharing it with a few other people. So we really do encourage you to come by and see the work in person. It's a really wonderful show. Another event that we have coming up on November 10th is with the Capital Area Art Supervisors in the Capital Region. These are the supervisors of all the area K through 12 art teachers throughout the Capital Region. We are going to be hosting a career panel that is going to be looking at all the different kinds of graduates of arts programs who have found wonderful careers in the arts. It's gonna be a really nice evening with 12 different panelists representing 12 different career tracks that you can take with an art degree. So we're hoping that you will join us for that as well. Again, that's on November 10th. All of this can be found on our website, which is opelka.sage.edu. I'm going to turn it over to Russell Sage's Sean Huvendick, who is with the Art and Design Department, our collaborator in this lecture series. And before I turn it over to Sean, I want to just please remind everyone to keep your microphones muted while you are not asking questions. That will just help the audio for everyone. And please feel free to use the chat function to pose any questions for Mindy or to post any comments as well. So please use those functions within Zoom. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, Judy. Hello, everybody, and thanks for being with us for the second installment of the Artist Lecture Series, co-hosted with Opelka Gallery and the Department of Visual and Performing Arts. I'm getting used to that. It's a new thing. Professor Sean Huvendick, very excited to bring you a special evening tonight with our own Professor Melinda McDaniel. She's going to be talking to us about her work tonight. We know her as Mindy lovingly, and Mindy grew up in Florida, inspired by the visual overload of Walt Disney World and the endless light at the center of the state's predictable weather. Her current work involves collaged ceramic figurines that play out and exaggerate the complexities of human emotional connections. Mindy received a BFA in studio art from Florida State University and an MFA in photography from Ohio State University. Her work has been exhibited at Space Gallery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at Governor's Island Art Fair in New York, and the Brick Rotunda Gallery in Brooklyn, and the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, Illinois. In 2014, Mindy received an Emerging Artist Award from the Arts Center of the Capital Region in New York. And even though she's from Florida, she calls Albany home. Please welcome Mindy McDaniel.
Hi. Thank you all for showing up tonight. I know that it is hard to get through yet another Zoom, but we're going to do things a little different tonight. I hope that it works. I've got a lot of different cameras set up because I want this to be a little less of a formal artist lecture and a little more of a studio visit. So yeah, so let's get going. This fire is also really hot. So I'm going to take you guys downstairs to my studio. So follow me. This is where we all hope that Mindy doesn't fall down the stairs. Okay. I'm doing good so far. Okay, so my studio is, I share my studio with my husband, Fernando, in our basement space. So you're kind of seeing a little bit of that and the setup. And so what I have on my screen right now is just kind of a little intro. And I'm gonna go through a couple of things, both like in slide, in like Keynote, and then through some cameras that are all around my studio and also at school. Hopefully Michaela is showing up soon. So I want to get started talking about this piece that I made about 4 years ago called 4 Years. And it is a work that I made in response to Trump getting elected. So what is represented here is 4 groups of 12 months, starting in January 2017 when Trump was inaugurated, and hopefully ending very soon in January 2021. I know that some people who are logged in right now may not agree, but I did just want to highlight here that the little red dot that you see, that's today's date, and we got to vote. It's coming up. That's the green dot on this. But look at how far we've come. We've come so far. I mean, it's kind of crazy to see it. One of the things that I liked about this work is that it's made on, it's cut and etched with the Sage's own laser cutter, and it's on a glossy, very glossy surface. So when you're in front of this, you can't help but kind of see your reflection in it, to see that you're somehow part of this time that we're in, whether you voted or you didn't vote for him. So it was really this kind of call, like, okay, this is what we've got. We've got this amount of time. What are we going to do with it? What's kind of even more, maybe a little more strange is that, while this was about 4 years ago that I made this piece, I didn't really think of myself as an artist who made work that was in any way political. And I don't think that I necessarily had made political work or as seriously as this piece and the next. This piece is more recent, and this is called Locker Room Talk, and this was made at the end of last year and then installed at a show at Union College this past January. And I just couldn't get out of my mind the fact that there was still so much support for our president, and that was the deal breaker was this locker room talk that happened like right before we voted in the last election. So this was kind of tricky for me, but so I more recently have been making work in ceramics. The school got a donation of molds, these plaster molds, and you pour really wet liquidy clay into them, and they cast these positives. And I started to mix up pieces from these positives. So what you're seeing here is these eagles, and there's an installation of the a small installation version of the work in my studio, so you can kind of get a bit of a closer look, but I have some details on the screen too. But these eagles are about they've got like an 18-inch like wingspan, but I've taken the head of the original eagle off, and I've replaced it with the head of a man, and replaced his eyes with hands that are like reaching out. And the cat the cat has a coffee cup mug. It was really interesting when I had this up and I was giving a lecture in the gallery space, and a Union College student had asked, hey, can you talk about this piece a little bit more? And I had a shining moment with everybody in the room, because I was like, well, this is what everything means. Like, this eagle is representing this with the hands reaching out, and the cat is essentially the pussy, and the pussy needed a hole, and that's how the coffee cup kind of came into play as the head. And I know that all of you are thinking, wow, she said it, yeah. But who doesn't want to hear that word early on in a lecture, right? So there are other figures that are kind of flying about, and they're two-headed figures, and instead of eyes, they have these just things that are like kind of poking out. And it's difficult to see what their role is in this narrative. Sometimes it looks like they're trying to block the eagle, and sometimes it looks like they are just as much a part of what the eagle is doing, attacking these cats with coffee mug heads. I just couldn't get over the fact that this quote, grab him by the pussy, you can do anything, was something that, could be said by someone in a position of a president, and just everything would be fine with that. And I really struggled with it. And I think that's why I had to make this. But I was really also inspired by the molds. I had these molds available, and it's almost as if like I couldn't not make this. Another work that is similar is this piece called Shady, that involves these men with banana heads, and they're kind of holding their hand out, like they're kind of shading these other figurines, and then there's these figurines that also have a hand out, and so they're kind of literally shading or sheltering, but they're also it's kind of a play on words, because this, the behavior, it's still political, it's still strange, this behavior that the president has exhibited during his time. And I know we don't want the whole talk to be about that, but I thought it was a good place to start, because it's so prevalent right now. It's on our minds. I hope you all do get out to vote on Tuesday if you haven't voted early. This is just a detail of that piece. It's installed in the round. And I'm gonna switch gears for a moment and just talk to you now about things that are currently in the studio, a little bit more about my process. So let me stop sharing so that we can see this screen, hopefully. I got to get back to Zoom. So bear with me, because this is totally new territory for me, and which is surprising, because it's like it's just insane what is happening in the studio. So bear with me and with Sean, because he's kind of the VJ right now, and he's helping me switch from things. But I just wanted to show you a couple of things in my studio. So a lot of my practice has kind of shifted home since April. And the reason for that is because of the pandemic. And when the school initially closed, in the spring, I frantically ran to school and tried to pick up as much as I could from my studio where I was making these ceramic works. And so in my studio here in my house, I have a lot of small molds. Like I just couldn't lug a ton of heavy molds home. And I say heavy molds because like the eagles, that was a really hefty, big mold, and I just couldn't carry those all back here. But I'm just sharing with you now, like one of my tabletops in the studio. And I've got a couple of molds laid out here. And so you can kind of see most of these molds are 2-part molds. And if you catch the shadow just right, you can kind of tell like what they are. So these are bunnies. These are like bunnies and like wildlife animals. And these are like little Cupid figurines. And I've got a couple of molds here that I've poured, and I'm just releasing, I'm just like separating these so you guys see a little bit what's going on. These are seals, what I'm taking out right now, but it's just their hind like quarters. So it's just this weird little body. But usually what I will do is I'll extract these positives from the mold, and they will become pieces of a palette. So in other words, what I'll wind up doing is preparing this side, just taking off the excess. And for example, I'm working on a series that I'll show you in a little bit called Bloom. And what I want to do is essentially like put these open bodies as heads of these resting figures like this. So that, takes a couple of other tools that I'm not going to, bore you with right now. But essentially what I do is I pour a lot of these molds. I just have them out displayed so that you guys can see a couple of them. It's a random sponge there. And I'll pop a couple more. It's kind of interesting. Some of these, it makes sense, like why they are designed the way they are. They're most often in parts. So what's strange is that, so this is like a set of like kind of cartoony looking squirrels. And so the way that they've designed this particular mold, the head is separate from the body. But what's kind of beautiful is when this guy comes out, if I can get it to come out nicely. This is how it's poured, which is really strange, this kind of disembodied thing. And then I, kind of make it worse and disembody them even more because I'm combining parts that don't necessarily belong together. So I was working on a lot of smaller things in my studio when the pandemic hit, and trying to make a lot of little things to then install on a wall, like I have, like I had shown you with the locker room talk piece. I really enjoyed the installation aspect of that piece. Although I had started out with just making these like smaller figurines. And so Sean, I don't know if we can just switch over to those real quick, that screen. I might have to switch it here.
How's that?
I can't see it, but I'm hoping everybody else can. But I'll start moving the
No,
camera.
I don't see anything.
Okay.
Me neither.
Is it frozen? Oh, okay. Okay. There it is. So this is where I started with the ceramics. I started making these smaller figurines. And so you can kind of get the sense of how these are made. So there's like the body of the nativity is a big source of these kinds of molds. And so there's the body of shepherds and wise men, and they're, in this case, they've been totally disembodied because now they have the body of like an animal or the head of an animal. And I just really got a kick out of the absurdity that I could develop from these molds by just simply kind of mixing up what you were supposed to do kind of naturally with these. So in other words, like, you wouldn't normally attach this goofy leg to Mary or give her, the body of an animal. You'd put her with the baby Jesus where she belongs. So, or give birds the head of a sink or the head of a toilet seat. This one is oddly popular. I don't get why.
I like it too.
It's just silly and weird, I think. But I really just I really loved the immediacy. Like I just really loved like, oh, what can I come up with next with this? Like what can I make that just feels, you know, silly and fun? And what's funny is that I would make one figurine and then I would just make a bunch of figurines. I wouldn't always recognize what needed to, like who needed to be paired up with who. That always came after. And so I made a ton of these like little figurines, but I'm having a lot more fun now, like kind of making larger pieces or larger installations that are made of multiples. I think that I have to share my screen back with Keynote now to get back on track. I appreciate you guys being patient with this studio visit because we are bouncing around.
Can everybody see? Can everybody see the map?
Yes.
Can everybody see Florida right now? So as Sean had said in that intro, I'm from Florida, and I definitely think that where I am from is of influence to the work I make. I mean, first of all, its shape is so strange. It's been, you know, the butt of many a political like fiasco. It's also, you know, kind of home to the Florida man memes. And so, and also the fact that my family, my mom and dad actually met working at Disney. And so my brother and I were really spoiled when we grew up because we grew up being able to, you know, celebrate our birthdays at Disney every year. I mean, it was ridiculous. And so, but my dad was in animation and like literally built the animatronic figures that you see in the rides. And so those were very much a part of my upbringing. And I think that all of that is influencing the work that I'm making now. I also, as Sean said in the intro, I, you know, went to Florida State University and then right on to the next national championship school, Ohio State University. And I studied photography in my undergrad and grad, but I really never approached the medium traditionally. I'm always trying to figure out some other way to manipulate it. It's so funny to think about like a traditionally, you know, matted and framed photo. When I was an undergrad, I was making giant prints and then stretching them on stretchers. These are the most recent photographs that I've made. And they're framed, yes, but they're encased in these like, you know, like basically what looks like fancy like wrapping or mylar, you know, for a party or something. So this is pretty typical of me, that I'm more often somehow sculpting with the photograph, or sculpting on top of the photograph or sculpting with photographic materials than I am creating a traditional image. Let me, is Michaela here?
Yep.
Okay, let's go to Michaela's screen. So Michaela has been helping me out a lot last semester and this semester, and she's actually in my studio at school. And I've just started to move back in to my studio at school. And so what she's doing is she's kind of panning a camera across some larger pieces that I've just recently pulled from a mold. And those pieces are basically they're basically serving as my palette for the next sculptures that I'm about to make. And some of the forms that you'll see, like the bears and this weird bulbous body, you'll see some of those forms and some pieces that are here in my studio. These are just some more molds that are laying out. The molds are not always just two parts. Some of them get really complicated, like that horse in the background, which is such a pain in the ass to pour because it's got multiple pieces to the mold and it kind of never turns out right. The bear that you see here on the right has some discoloration because I found some free molds through Craigslist, and they were basically in this woman's barn. And so they've become discolored from water and other little animals making nests in that sweet little mold. So, but you'll see the bear in some other work that I'll share in a minute. So can we switch the camera, Michaela? I have Michaela doing some fancy camera work too. So we're gonna see the other side of my my studio at school. Maybe. And if not, it's not the end of the world for sure. But so I have a studio upstairs, oddly enough, on the second floor in the printmaking studio, so 201. And we've recently moved all of the molds that were in sculpture on the first floor to this studio. So it's just basically surrounded by shelves. So it could be that Michaela's like having some difficulty because it's kind of tight in there. But it's just more of what you were seeing in my studio here, but things that were pulled and have been bisque fired. So in other words, a bisque firing allows the clay, to kind of fuse more, that it gets out the liquid, whatever moisture was there. And so all of that grain has fused together, and it's ready for painting. It's ready for glaze. So that's just what that other image would be if the camera could switch. But what'd you say? Sorry. My husband is in the background trying to like figure out why it wasn't working. I'm just gonna switch back now to sharing my screen, and so you saw a lot of bears in my studio at school, and I have a lot of bear molds and big like mouse molds. And I during the pandemic, I like everybody else, I was at home and kind of nesting because we were kind of forced to be home. And so I was like going and planting things and like, focusing more on yard work and flowers. And I made these, I don't know, I'm not convinced of them. I still think they're a little dumb, but I tend to lean more towards absurd than run or silly than run away from it. In other words, when I'm making something, I don't shy away from it. Like if something comes up and it is just weird, I usually just roll with it for as long as I can before I start to kind of see something come out of this. And so this is from a piece called Hole in the Head. Like a hole in the head, which is something that my mom would say a lot, oh, you need this like you need a hole in the head. And it's this weird insult / joke. But I didn't necessarily make them at first with the intention of turning them into planters. But with the pandemic and with this kind of being at home, I was like, let me try this. Otherwise they're just these things with these holes. And so I started like planting impatiens in these holes and other flowers. And you can actually see on another screen called Hole in the Head, this, and I don't know, I can't remember, Sean, if I have to stop sharing for you to switch that screen. There it goes. So this is what those flowers look like now. They look a little worse for wear. I think that has to do with the fact that the weather is changing. But I have traded some of the plants out for begonias, which is what you're seeing on the right side there. They were doing great in the warmer weather, but now I really love the fact it makes me think of Annihilation, but Annihilation in like one thing kind of taking over another. A friend of mine had actually mentioned that that part of the movie Annihilation when one of the characters is kind of walking through this environment, and she kind of transforms into these flower figures. And I just liked the idea of watching this thing seemingly to grow out of and kind of deforming these really cute little bear and baby bear weird figurines. And I've also, this is so silly. I've also been experimenting with vases, or this idea of like, you know, I think that the cat mug, the cat with the mug head was a impetus for this, because I was thinking, oh, like it's really interesting, this form that isn't meant to hold, you know, be a vessel, but it is a vessel. So I was liking the idea of, you know, this functional, non-functional thing. And so I've got a couple of pieces set up here that this is the first time they've had flowers in them, but they were meant to have flowers, and then they were meant to be these weird vases. And so there's a couple of different pieces there that are a mix from a lot of different molds, whether it's the bear or the horse, or, you know, these little like kid legs kind of attached to this bookworm, or the little girls that are, you know, meant to be these cute little figurines, but I flipped them on their head so that the opening of their dresses are kind of, you know, have these shoots of flowers coming out. I'm really enjoying the introduction of these plants into these pieces, but it is, I think that the pieces where the flowers are growing rather than display might be more interesting, because I feel like the flowers are so bright and vivid that they, you know, kind of take the attention away from the thing that they're being held by. But it's a thing that I'm still like working through. Those pieces are totally new, the flower pieces, and I just kind of test them out at home on the table, and I thought this would be a good place to kind of show them off a little too, because this is all stuff that I'm just thinking about or is in progress. It's not really anything that I've necessarily shown in a gallery or exhibition just yet. What is going on right now is this piece called Bloom, which is back on my main screen, and it involves this was directly, you know, as a result of the pandemic, because when we first went into quarantine together, or we were first not quarantined, but you know, just kind of relegated to stay at home because it was safer. I was thinking a lot. I just felt like we were all laying around so much, and we were all being so like kind of just caught up in our own worry. And, you know, kind of couldn't really function beyond much of that, because there were so many things that were unanswered. You know, we were worried about ourselves. We were worried about family members that weren't nearby. We couldn't go see family members. It was just this weird mix. And then as spring transitioned into summer, you know, there was this kind of, you know, collective mind going on because of the Black Lives Matter, that suddenly this kind of awakening happened, late, but still an awakening that happened, I think, both out of the pandemic and into this, you know, these big cultural problems that we have to address. And so these little figures that I started making that have the body of a cow, and instead of the head of a cow, they have these just openings, they have these orifices, and they're basically, like, to me, they are us, and they're waiting for information. They're just waiting to be filled up. They're waiting to be informed. And so I kind of saw them as this weird herd. And I don't mind if folks don't see that. That doesn't bother me at all. If anything, I'm totally happy with, you know, somebody just looking at the work and being like, oh, that's weird, or oh, that's pretty. Like, I actually really love having work that is beautiful, even though that's such a faux pas. And so weird to say out loud, but I am attracted to things that are beautiful. And this arrangement, this is actually an installation, and it needs to be, I think, way more powerful than it is. I was going to have a camera like on the wall, but it just didn't feel as epic as I think it needs to be. So while it is installed and is on the wall, I think I need to make another, like basically the same amount for it to really be as impactful as I'd like it to be. Once it was up, I thought it was weird because it almost seemed to look like a COVID, the way, this kind of what the microscope images reveal. It looked like this like kind of prawny looking sphere. And I feel like there's evidence of that there too, that probably, what? Oh, I have it. Oh, you know what? Maybe it's not sharing. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm like talking about it and you can't see it. That's classic. It's classic Mindy. There we go. So this piece is installed, but the camera just didn't do it justice, and it's also not as big as I think that it needs to be. So it's still very much something that is continuing. And I hope that what I described is now connected with this image. Of course, again, this is a little clunky, but I think it's a lot more fun than just standing next to images and me talking at you guys about them. So this is what I'm calling Bloom right now. And this is, this I think is very much a part of what we're going through right now, what we've been through with the pandemic, and then the Black Lives Matter that kind of, I think, jolted us out of our homes and into what really needs to be talked about, and what really needs to be, I don't know if it can be resolved, but it would be great if we could resolve it. So this piece is, something going on. I also started photographing this piece because I was, at the time that I was starting to make it, I was also teaching an alternative photo class. And I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute and switch gears to this other camera that's behind me. Just one second. Print wall. This wall is a wall of pieces that I was making while my students were, basically thrown into, taking an alternative processes class virtually. And alternative processes like cyanotype, which are the blueprints that you see on the wall, and Van Dyke Brown, which are the brown pieces that are on the wall. This involves like painting emulsion onto paper and then having a printed negative, and going out into the sunlight to expose these images, and then just using water and some other chemistry to rinse them off. We didn't actually get into the Van Dyke because that involved fixer, and I just didn't want to be shipping fixer and then having students just wash that down the drain. That just felt wrong. So we stuck with the cyanotypes, and it was crazy because my house became a BFA program. I mean, I got a darkroom set up in my downstairs bathroom, and I'll just walk you over to that really fast. It's pretty disgusting, the bathroom, just because it's oddly big and it has a brown toilet and shower. This is the makeshift darkroom. You can see that there's chemistry down there. That was for students would mail me their film, and I would process it and then ship it back to them. And then this other side is basically where I would mix the chemistry for the cyanotype printing, and then I would ship that to them. It was really nuts. And then I was also printing negatives. So I didn't steal it, I borrowed it. I got permission from Matt too. So Matt's the chair of the department. So I borrowed a printer from the tech center, and students would send me digital images. I would print their digital negatives and then ship those back. I mean, it was crazy, the production that was going on in this studio once we went remote. And I was really enjoying working right alongside with the students, getting this opportunity to, photograph these ceramic pieces, and also try and figure out, like, what is this role now that they're playing, now that the subject of a photograph rather than the objects themselves. Like, can I tell a different story now that they're kind of abstracted yet again as the subject of these photographs? And so what's kind of nuts, though, is that, and this happens to me every time I work with cyanotype, I don't know if it's the mixture, but or if it's my negatives, like how I'm printing my negatives, but I feel like they're always blown out. So even though you're seeing all these prints on the wall and they might look really cool, like none of those are really good prints at all. And I have a whole other stack of prints that I just didn't even put up because they weren't even anything. But the reason that I am showing it is because it takes a really long time to get to something good. And I there might be like 2 good images up on that wall, but to me they're not what they should be for what they are. And I kept, like, the 2 large square pieces that you see in the center, those are more recent. I kept really like pushing, like, I want these to be blue. I feel like the blue color, this cold color, like, really works well with the subject matter. These, headless cows that have, instead of a head, they have these weird orifices, openings. And it just dawned on me. It was like, I don't know. I just came to the point where I was like, I don't know why I'm just making copies of these things. Like, I don't know why they have to be blue. And so I was like, it's so funny how obvious things can be sometimes. So I wound up just taking the negatives and or the images, the files that I had, and just printing them in black and white with the printer upstairs left over from school. And that's what these pieces became. And I'm just going back because I think I jumped ahead. So this is the original work, but I had kind of used pieces from that before I installed it on the wall, just kind of trying to create these new narratives, or to bring attention to the fact that I wanted these figures to look like as if they were gathering together, as if they were like kind of trying to come to the center point. And I'm using the circle frame because I use circles a lot in my work, and circles, ovals, or perfect squares. And I think that because the work itself is installed in a circle, I feel like the images have to be circular. And so some of them are somewhat minimal, the images and the way they're arranged, the figures in the pieces, and then some get very busy. Like, it feels like it's hard to determine what these openings are actually connected to. They almost look like coral and other things. So I feel like there's things that I'm able to accomplish in the photograph right now, which is weird because I haven't photographed, I would say, like, with a traditional camera. Like, I'm using an SLR again, and before, all of these images that you're seeing on the wall behind me, those were all made with a pinhole camera. But I'm having a lot of fun, kind of seeing these through a new lens, and kind of reshaping what they can be, which may not necessarily happen with the works themselves. And so, like the figurines that I was showing you with the little webcam, those figurines, when I photograph them, I have to arrange them so specifically for you to see why this piece that the figurines is now aimed at, the figurines camera is now aimed at. why it's funny, why it's called Get That Leg. You can't tell right now because the camera is like at level and they're black and the figurines are black, and you can't kind of make out their features. But I have to, when I document these pieces, I have to really kind of position them so specifically. And so I'm just kind of recognizing that there might be a place for these ceramic pieces to exist both in their physical state and then in the photograph, so that I can kind of tell the story in a couple of ways. This kind of brings me to another work that I'm just going to share again here a slide. Oh gosh, here it is. And so I don't know if you all know the artist Michael Oatman, but he recently was doing a piece with, or had a call for this magazine called Cut Me Up magazine, or Cut Me Up or Cut Up. And it's basically a magazine that's about collage. And what you had to do was you had to get a copy of the magazine, and his call, he's the curator for the call, and he also is a collage artist, and he kind of has his hands in everything. But his call was to take 3D objects and kind of reconfigure them and reposition, just basically create this thing, and then, photograph it. And I was like, oh, this is perfect for me because it's exactly what I'm doing anyway. So the thing is that I didn't want it to necessarily be of my own sculptures, but there are some of my own sculptures in this. So there's also piggy banks and weird random mugs and things like that, but I zip tied them all together. What's kind of crazy is that when I made this, I had filled it with flowers, because you guys know I'm on this whole flower kick right now. And I just wanted to make a big, absurd, ridiculous vase that didn't really make much sense. And so I had taken a ton of photos of this thing right before the deadline, with a ton of flowers in it. And I hated every one of them. I had shown my 2D class like the hundreds of images that I had made of this thing on my dining room table, positioned it a million ways, took a ton of photos. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then I went back and reread the directions. And it was like, oh yeah, you have to use pieces of the previous magazine. So you literally had to take the magazine that you got and use it somewhere in the sculpture that you made. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't do this right. So I took all the flowers out, took each page of the magazine, tore it up, created these weird like tubes, cylinders, and kind of positioned them within the work. And I was really excited about it because I was like, oh, this looks like a total explosion. It looks like the piece is called Discharge. But again, I was really enjoying these photographs that I was making of the sculpture, and in some cases more than the sculpture itself. I think that I have a camera aimed at the actual piece, and give me 1 second. I'm just going to switch over to the actual piece so you guys can get a sense of that versus the photographs. I hope that it's showing up. On the figurines camera are the figurines, but also this piece, and it's kind of unruly and strange. It's also still filled with water when I had the flowers in it, but I was just really enjoying like the, kind of messing with composition and things like that. I was enjoying the fact that it was still absurd, that you still couldn't quite tell like what the heck was going on in the piece. And I just really love its chaos. I'm having a good time with that. But I do think that the photographs, now looking at the photographs too on screen, there's such an opportunity for a change in scale, for a change in meaning, and that I don't know is really readable in the work itself. But that is really the most current thing that I've made in the studio, and I doubt that it will get into the next month's publication of Cut Up magazine or Cut Me Up magazine, but I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to make it, because I think it's keeping me on this wavelength of you know, in a way going back to photography a little bit, or trying to figure out ways that these things can exist beyond the figurine itself. So let me, I'm hoping that I covered everything. Let me see.
Mindy, really
yes.
quickly, there's a couple questions.
Great.
Do you have a title for your wall of prints?
No, I don't, because those, as nice as they may look gridded out, I know that we tend to like organized grids, just in general. It doesn't have a title. It's literally something that I put up today, and they're not to me successful prints. This is the rest of the stack of these prints that, you know, there's just so many, and I tried to put up the best, but there's also duplicates up there. I don't have a title. It's just kind of a working wall in the studio. Are there other?
Yeah, another question. Someone says, regarding the cows with orifices, maybe it's because of the pandemic, but they look so much like lung tissue. I think you mentioned that, but was that a consideration?
No, I don't know what lung tissue looks like, but I was seeing more how they kind of like once installed, they kind of mimicked the actual like COVID under the microscope, that what it looks like, the virus itself. But that's fascinating. I don't know what lung tissue looks like, but that's kind of interesting as well.
Kara Jeff says, I like how with these, you're starting with sculpture and then turning them back into photos, where when you start with photography, you often end with sculpture. We talked a little bit about that, but I mean, is that a really obvious, do you do that very consciously?
No, it's so weird. It's so weird to be making photographs of these pieces, and I'm very much on the fence about it. I don't know. I think I actually had said this to Billy once. I was like, I don't know why I'm photographing these. I feel like I'm just making copies of copies, and I'm still kind of conflicted, but I do like them. I'm leaning into the curiosity of it and trying to figure it out as I go. So yeah, it's funny that she's making that connection, because it's not something that I had necessarily like realized, but it is pretty obvious. Yeah, but I guess I wasn't doing it so consciously. Yeah.
That's great. Does anyone else have any questions for Mindy?
Feel free to raise your hand or turn your mic on, shout it out.
I said you should call your wall of prints Wonder Wall.
Wonderful. Okay. Thanks, Eliana.
Karen asks, are you selling your little vases? Because she loves them.
Actually, it's funny. I mean, of course, sure. Why not? I was actually like thinking like, oh, do I sell these? So because it's such an early kind of part of the process, like I'm still answering questions with them. But I mean, if people like them, why not? Like I mean, it's none of this stuff was out in the studio, and it happened over the course of the past few days. So it's so weird making a thing and then having to put it in storage. So if somebody loves something enough that they're like, I want to buy that, that's fantastic. Sure.
That's great. Lily asks, what is your favorite piece out of everything you've shown tonight or that you've made?
I I really like the bloom piece, the installation. I love it, but I also am disappointed in how it kind of turned out, because it turned out a lot smaller than I wanted it to. I think it's like 30 inches in diameter. And I would really love for it to really occupy the wall. And it's on a small wall downstairs in our sunroom right now. And it just feels so tiny. And so, I mean, I just feel like it could have the impact that it needs to. And so I just have to, even though it's my favorite piece, it's right now, it's just not finished yet. It needs so much more. It was weird I was setting up last night late, like a camera downstairs in this other space where this piece was installed, and where I usually have the planted pieces. They're usually downstairs in this like little sunroom area rather than up in the studio here where there's no light, natural light. But I was like, this just looks horrible. And I just couldn't, I was like, I'm just going to photograph it and put it in the slideshow, because it's just not done. But I thought this was such a great opportunity to talk about things that were in progress, or, kind of in, states of complete and incomplete. But yeah, Lily, I went on, but that's my favorite right now.
I mean, is it as easy as just making more ceramic pieces to add to it, or is it kind of like a one and done?
Yeah, it's as easy as that. The thing is that I only have so many molds. Like I shop on eBay to find molds, and it got to the point, like the cow mold that I'm using to make, to capture the body of those figures. I used it so much that it started to get these little holes in the plaster, and it's because the plaster is taking on too much water. Like I was reusing it like probably too fast. I wasn't letting the mold dry out. And so I had to go and try and find a second mold. And now I've got two. So it means I could make them faster, but it takes, I think when I was going really hard at it, I was able to make 15 of those figures a week, 15 to 20 of those figures a week. And so it's going to take me a few weeks of solid work on just making those to, I think, get it to the size that it needs to be. So
sounds like you need a studio assistant.
Yeah.
Related to that piece, since Bloom doesn't really have flowers in it, is there a reason you installed it in your sunroom?
There was a nice wall in the sunroom that I could use. That was the only real reason. I mean, the Bloom itself, I was thinking of, the reason I named it is because I felt like it looked flower-like, but I was also thinking about like the virus blooming, or like sicknesses kind of like viruses in bloom, and also like is it possible for us to kind of bloom out of these experiences, whether it is whatever else was going on across the time that we're also in the pandemic, because things have been like certainly polarizing, in addition to the virus and how people are dealing with the virus. So it has multiple meanings to me anyway.
Kara, she asked, do you think the limitations of COVID have pushed new discoveries for you in the studio?
Yes. I have to say that I do feel incredibly fortunate, and I feel bad now because I'm just like, I didn't thank everybody for this, but I feel incredibly fortunate because I was able to kind of grab whatever I could before Sage closed, to kind of recreate my studio at home, to be able to work in the ceramics. Because typically I would only do that at school, at my studio at school, or to have a printer that I could use at home. And I think it absolutely changed some things. But what was weird is that I think for artists, I think all artists were really fortunate in this, because I think so many of us are also used to just working all the time. Like I think artists who are also teachers, They kind of have two full-time jobs. And so, you know, anytime I'm not teaching or doing something for Sage, I'm in my studio anyway. So there wasn't like a lot of, there wasn't a whole, you know, kind of crazy shift, except for the fact that I was here more. I was spending more physical time in my studio at home. And that, I think, I mean, I'm a firm believer in like work begets work. So I feel like I was like way more productive. Even having teaching, you know, a full load of classes online, you know, in the spring. And it was amazing to me, the amount of work that I got done between prints and, you know, ceramic. I mean, it was just kind of like nutty. It was almost like being on a weird residency where I had to teach. So residencies are these things, if there's people still logged in, I doubt that they would be, but the residency are these things for artists and writers and creatives, where you kind of get this uninterrupted time to work. And you know, most of the time they'll feed you and house you and things like that. So you get a studio and you just get to work. And so it was kind of weirdly like that, even though I was still the one making, or Fernando and I were still the ones making meals and you know, cleaning and all that stuff. But I think it did affect it, but then also was very kind of still, you know, business as usual. But I really could not have done it without the visual, you know, art and design, which is now the, you know, visual and performing arts department. I couldn't have done it without having been a part of Sage. I certainly couldn't have done it without, couldn't have done this talk without Opalka. Like, I feel like we have such a strong community at Sage, and I just really love being a part of that, and really love the colleagues and friends there. Everybody's really supportive in that. What other questions? Are there other questions?
Yeah, speaking of collaboration, do you think working with these molds in any way is a collaboration with the artists who designed them? Artists who probably had different intention perhaps for their use?
Sure. I mean, these molds are usually things that would be in a, you know, ceramics shop, you know, like, you know, they're meant to be made, you know, multiples are meant to come from them. And so, you know, it's, you know, it's not uncommon. I mean, I know that some people are thinking of like the ceramics that you kind of, you know, you go and you sign up and then you get to paint this figurine that's bisqued or whatever. And usually that stuff is really like practical. Like, you go and you show up and you get like a mug and you paint it, and it's, you know, but I mean, these are definitely made by different companies. Like, this one says Duncan on it, and Duncan is, you know, kind of one of a big mold maker. Most of the molds that I have are from Duncan, and I'm sure that they're, I mean, mold making is its own art form for sure. But I mean, these were meant to be mass produced. They were meant to make like hundreds and thousands of figurines in these shops. I think what's interesting is that you know, this isn't, you know, hip anymore. Like, people aren't going to ceramic shops necessarily, or specifically a ceramics shop to buy their nativity set. If anything, they're ordering it online, or they're going to some specialty store that kind of carries more than just ceramics. And so what's really weird is how available a lot of molds are, and how a lot of them are for free, because people are like, they're big heavy things, and they're just not like, you know, they're not easy to store and keep around unless you're involved in, you know, making these things over and over again for a business. And so I don't know how collaborative it is, because they've also changed so many hands. Like, I'm sure that these molds that I have were part of a business at one time, but you know, I mean, the lady that I got a handful of molds from last summer, where she was like, oh, I got these free through, you know, some other thing. So I mean, I would say it would be a collaboration if I guess knew the designer of these molds. But you know, they're a company just like anything else.
You mentioned your work became more overtly political after the last election. Do you see that continuing?
Yeah. I if the right thing speaks to me. So when Michaela was going through my studio space at Sage, there was an elephant that was, something that I just pulled, and I keep wanting to do something with elephants and something with donkeys because I have both. And I've made a couple of pieces upstairs which I did not show that kind of start to look at this, but yeah, it just, I guess it has to kind of like come to me. I don't know. It's kind of dependent on the molds and like what I wind up putting together from this palette of positives. I let that stuff kind of happen naturally. I try not to plan it too much until it gets to a point where, something like locker room talk happens or bloom happens. So, yeah, anything is possible. I wouldn't be surprised.
We got a comment from Caitlin. I like the simplicity within your complexity. It's definitely unusual design compared to what you would think of regarding art. And that's what makes it stand out. Especially the bloom piece, which is colored like a blank canvas, yet there's so much dimension that gives it life and meaning. Thank you for sharing your work with us.
That's awesome. That's a really nice comment. Thank you so much.
And if there's no more questions, that's probably a good sign off. And a big thank you to you, Mindy, for showing us your studios. There's like studios of everything's everywhere.
I really appreciate you all letting me like take you through all this weird stuff. I really wanted this to be a non-traditional lecture, and I appreciate everybody's patience. This felt like a great opportunity to experiment. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, that's great. If everybody wants to unmute themselves, we can give Mindy a great big round of applause.
There you go, Mindy. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming. Oh, we got 2 new messages. Thanks. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Mindy. Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, y'all. Thank you.
Movie star.
I don't know if yay.
That's very good, Mindy. That's fun.
Do I end it? I think it's still like, I don't know if I should just end it.
I can end it, or we can.
Okay, I didn't know if we. All right.
I creep around to make sure it's all tidied up, I suppose.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I couldn't see if like people had all fully gone and if we were like staying after for some reason. But anyway, if everybody's gone, then let's say goodbye.
Good job, Mindy. It was great.
All right. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate your patience in it. It kind of went all over, but I hope it was okay.
No, it was great. It was just, there's so much to see and so much to listen to, and all the cameras. I think we did pretty good. We'll have to see the recording, see how it turns out.
Yeah, we'll have to see the recording for sure. Yeah, that'll be interesting. All right. Thanks so much, Sean. We'll see you later.